that actually made me think of something else. Is these opens just give you such a different level of pressure, especially out there on the water. Um, and I swear it doesn't matter where I'm at. Like, let's just say, for instance, the James River, you'd pull in a backwater area, whether it was a creek or whatever. And this particular time we were there, they were spawning, so most of the fish were pulled back there in the backs, and you would get back in there. And I'll give you a certain situation
Wa-
that I was
Was
in.
it bad? Like, I mean,
It was
me and
bad.
you haven't talked. Was it like
Yeah.
James River's big, correct?
It's a
Like
big area.
long?
It was big but small.
Did it
Especially
fish
this time is
small?
big but small.
It
Um
did fish small?
Very, very small.
Really?
The
Okay.
first day I got a decent number. I was like boat 60 something. And I run in the very, very back of this creek.
60, good number.
Yeah, good number. I mean, it was for 225.
I know. It's
And
just
and
funny.
I get in the very back of this creek, what I think is the very back. I mean, dude, I'm sitting in 2 foot of water, and that's the deepest section of the creek. And so I'm like, man, like I got here first, and I'm like, Jack, because I'd gotten a bunch of bites on this one stretch. And I get there, and I see a boat coming around the corner, and I had to come around this creek turn, and I'm like, oh man, surely not. He's not going to come back here. He buzzes right on past me, and
On
I
plane?
on plane. And when I tell you this was skinny, like I actually thought I had the footage because I saved the clip because I've never had someone run that close to me before. But this boat just about brushed my boat when he ran by me, and I'm sitting on the outside edge of a laydown.
Dude, if
Okay,
he hits that laydown,
if he hits anything,
anything.
anything, it's game over. On plane past me, and then gets past me like 30 yards and starts idling. Well, he goes back like one more turn. I didn't even know you could get back that far. I literally had 4 more boats come back there. Now everybody else, as soon as they burned the flat, they got off pad and they idled past me. The
Oh, they
right
did go
thing to
past
do.
you?
Oh yeah. So there was 5 boats past me. I promise you there wasn't 200 yards of water back there. Maybe at most 200 yards of water back there. And so there was 5 boats back there. Now nobody else was on the stretch I was on. And I caught the crap out of them right through there. Once that boat, everything kind of settled down. But speaking of pressure though, I know you work at Strike King, you do a bunch of baits, you do a lot of different things. What are you working on right now that would help me in a situation to where when I'm dealing with that kind of boat pressure is going to make me a better fisherman? Because like we all have these things, these little tricks and knickknacks and baits, and oh, I can shake my rod like that. The best one lately is the most. It's the funniest one ever.
What?
Is the Drew Cook like? Have you seen it where he sits there and shakes his rod for bedding fish, and that's like the ultimate trigger for. I'm just, and I'm not saying it doesn't work. And Drew is a nice guy, and he caught the crap out of me, won, and whatever. But I feel like we blow that out of proportion just a bit.
Well,
Um,
like, so even the other day, yeah. So there's two parts to that, I guess, or whatever. So when I've started working, how we've done this, Strike King is set up differently now in the
yeah,
sense of how we go about doing things. And I'm not in the business. So we were talking off air earlier about like colors, right? What were you talking about colors
yeah,
for?
yeah, 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 yeah.
What'd you say?
Oh, so we were talking about fire crawl. So we got fire crawl. This is new fire crawl.
Which looks awesome.
It
Like
does look awesome. It has an
I
orange
worked
blade on
on
it.
I did work on that, trying to get the orange and the red and the right hue. Like I was a big part of like getting the those colors for fire crawl, like how we all wanted it,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. But you talk
But
about trendy
correct.
baits. You talk about trendy
Yeah.
baits and colors. You know, fire crawl the last couple of years has been like this. It almost has this cult following of guys saying
Yeah.
like, "Oh, it's got to be fire crawl. Like I can't. Red doesn't work. It has to
But it
be
has
fire crawl."
this little bit
And
of orange.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's got to have that orange in it. Like it can't just be red. Like we made a fire crawl crankbait. We make
But look
fire
at the
crawl
top.
literally everything.
But look at the top of that.
What is it? Is it green? It's green,
Yeah.
isn't
See,
it?
it has to be. It
Yeah.
has to be
Oh,
that
it
like,
has to be. And I'm
dude,
just like,
I was right there in the middle of all that going, all right, we're gonna do it like everyone wants it. But to your point,
I mean, like, guys, it's I being a guy that fishes lipless crankbait a lot, grew up on Rayburn. Don't get me wrong. I know there's a difference in red to a certain level, but at the end of the day, I can pick up a red. It doesn't matter, and it's gonna work. And I feel like a lot of times we take it too far, as like we get so locked in of like this has to be exactly what you're saying it's gonna be, or it doesn't work. And I feel like we take it a little bit too far.
so
That's my personal opinion.
I got so yeah, I got so the rattle trap deal. The rattle trap deal is the only one where I'll say color matters, but it's irrelevant.
Yeah,
And what I mean
absolutely.
by that is there's you were with rattle trap for a long time, right?
Really long time. Yeah,
How
yeah,
many
yeah.
do you remember how many colors at one point they had? I have no clue.
No, but it was
Was it 300?
astronomical.
I'm
Yeah, it
literally
was. Yeah, it was something like that.
so of those 300, yes, you could pick one up and a guy in the back of the boat could absolutely destroy you on one of those colors.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now the next day it could be a different color.
Hmm.
I'm telling you, that's why I don't get caught up in colors because it if you were some person that like got caught up on that, it would make you crazy because there was no way you would be able day to day to figure out of those 300 colors which is that, like, for whatever reason. And a lot of it had nothing to even maybe even do with color, but regardless, that's what's going on. And so I'd always see these guys go, like, one day I go for 3 days in a row, I catch them on this one color really good, and then this other guy catches maybe not even more than me on a different color, but maybe two bigger ones. And I just go, man, you think it's a color? I'm like, no, I think it's just fishing.
Yeah.
Because like for the last 3 days, I've caught him on this and I still caught him on it today. You caught two bigger ones, but maybe you just threw
At
five
that
feet to the
right
left.
angle that yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I, I do believe color matters. I don't get caught up on it. And so like Russell, man, my buddy Russell Cecil fishes. It's the best thing. He has a bag of brush hogs,
Hmm.
and in that bag are greens and browns of brush hogs. And what I mean by greens and browns, and he just dumps them all in this one bag. And when he goes to Carolina rig, he's like, I don't know how many times he's calling me or be like, what color is that? He's like, I don't know. It's whatever I picked up out of that bag. It's greenish, brownish, it's whatever. And they're like, so he's like, yeah, I don't know. I'll probably throw 20 different colors in there. They're eating it on every cast. It don't matter.
Yeah.
And we've seen that where I don't know how many guys over time are like, hey man, you get that red flake in there? Got to have that blue flake in there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
man, yeah, man, I don't
Speaking of
think it matters.
speaking of rattle trap colors or lipless crankbait colors, one of the very, very best guys that I know that does it is Chris McCall. He's a really, really good trap fisherman. Always has been, and for as long as I know, he probably always will be. And when you look at what he does, and mimicking some of the very best trap fishermen that I know, is they don't really worry as much about having four different colors of reds on as they do worry about having, I want a red one, I
Yeah,
want a chartreuse one, I want a white one, I
and a
want
chrome.
a chrome one. And a really good trap fisherman, if you go with their deck, and especially early spring on Rayburn or certain times, that is kind of their setup. Is they have different color, options. It's a
Variation.
variations. It's not a I have got three or four reds on, then like two white ones on. Like, no, they have one of each, and depending on watercolor situation, cloud cover, if it's sunny, if it's bright, if it's windy, they have little tricks that they can do to catch fish.
But
They don't care about the fact if it's, fire crawl or red crawl or Rayburn red crawl. Like it has way more to do with, are they eating red today? Are they eating white today? Are they eating chrome today?
and that's why I said the guy trying to figure out the
Yeah,
300 colors, the really good ones are they can figure out four within a day.
absolutely.
Four
Yeah,
is something they can manage to do. So you bring up the Strike King thing. Strike King was what I'm not in charge of, I helped with. So I helped with the colors of fire crawl and things like that.
correct. Yeah,
I just help with them. They ask my opinion. Like we go, I can go through all that with them. But there's two separate deals. There's inline production, which are what you were just talking about, like the subtle details. Hey, let's make this one that rattles, not rattled.
Yeah.
Hey, let's just make this thing do this over that. I'm not really in charge of that. Now I help with that. I'll help with they'll ask me opinions. I try things out, stuff like that. But I'm totally in what you're asking for, in my opinion, is the innovation part.
Yeah.
That is taking something that no one else has, right? So when you go to James River, you look around going, yeah, man, y'all can all go through there, but I'm going to be throwing this that does this, and it's totally different than any of y'all, what y'all have.
Well,
Or,
and thinking about, like, just for instance, I'm gonna have there's gonna be at least one comment here that I promise you'll see it. And that comment's gonna be, well, there's a real big difference between dark red and light red. Oh, okay. So, like, this is fire crawl. It's almost orange with a red back. You could honestly say there's another category between red and orange. I get it. You could say red's one color, orange is another color. Orange is something you want to use in dirtier water. Red's something you can use in clearer water, so on and so forth. And that's fine. But having 5 different variations of that's great. But you really only need to minimize it to 1 or 2. You don't have to have a bunch of variations of the exact same color. One difference on our Thunder Cricket especially is it has an orange blade, which I really am a huge fan of because it's so bright. If you see like guys like Jason Christie throwing their spinner baits in early spring, they have like an orange or a red kicker blade,
always.
and that is a really big deal. When you're going to throw a fire crawl Thunder Cricket, it's probably going to be about the same time of year, and that orange gives you that same bright blade that your spinner bait would give you. So I get that. Some red, like we have a red one that has like a green back on it that has a black blade on it. So if you want the dirty water special, if you want the one that has the orange stuff, I understand that, and I think it is a good idea to throw something like that. But day in and day out, if they are on red, you can throw red. You don't have to mix it up. I know I got behind Todd one day. We were fishing a team tournament and we were fishing the grass, and I was throwing one of my special oil traps that I've had for 10 years, 12 years, and I caught the fire out of him behind him on it. But I truly could have picked up any red trap and done the same thing.
I wouldn't throw in a trap though, but mind you, in
I
front
was
of you.
throwing a trap behind you,
Yeah.
but you were throwing something else.
Yes.
Exactly. No, and I wasn't trying to say, but I mean, like, most of the
I
time,
know.
people don't go behind Todd and catch him on a trap for sure. But
Yeah.
I think more so than anything, I think you can attest to this. More so than anything, it's all about the confidence of the bait that you have in your hand and what you can do with it. And if you know how to manipulate that bait to do everything you want it to do. Like I
In a
said, I
team
could have picked
tournament,
up any other red trap that day and would have caught them just as good
yeah.
because I understand how the bait works and I can manipulate that bait to do everything I want it to do. So
And you were in how we were fishing that day, like obviously a team tournament. So like I was targeting something different than
yeah,
you. And I think a lot of those guys, even in that tournament, were targeting more what I was fishing,
yeah,
and you targeted stuff that they weren't. And so
yeah,
once again, was it the color? Color was great, but so much more of it had to do with how you were working it,
yeah,
where you were working it. Cause I was like, are you gonna get in the front with me? You're like, no, I'm staying in the back. Like you
yeah,
wanted in the back of the boat,
yeah,
and it because you had a way of what you wanted to do. And so I just let you do your thing. I caught the fish that where I was, and we caught them pretty good.
yeah.
We probably should have done it all day long. I think we didn't do it until the
We did it
last,
for like 3 hours or something.
yeah, and smashed on them. We
Yeah.
probably should have done it from the beginning, but regardless.
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
but
so
to the point though is it's we really overanalyze color, and in certain situations it does matter. Does it
it
matter sometimes that you're flipping black and blue instead of green pumpkin? 1,000%.
yeah, that's not what we're
Yeah.
saying.
No,
It's
but
it's the black and blue with the
yeah,
black fleck
yeah,
or the blue fleck in it. That's where I'm like, okay, now and man, I have really good fishermen, really good. Like if you told me if Andrew goes, hey, I'm catching and flipping, dude, Andrew knows this about him. Okay. And I'll never ask him another question.
Yeah.
So many guys were like, so like, what size weight you throwing? So do you have it on? Do you have what color?
Are you
And
doing
I'm
on
just like,
braid? Are you
I'm like, dude,
are you dyeing the tail?
I've flipped enough in my lifetime to know I know how to flip. Oh, they're biting flipping bait. So I go on it.
Yeah.
Now, if I go all day long and never get a bite, I'm like, hey, but even then, I don't think it's a color thing. I'm like, I'm either
It's a
targeting the wrong
profile
thing.
thing. Yeah.
It's a bunch. Well, I don't even
Yeah.
think I'm just like I'm probably
Well, I
not
mean,
doing it
like
right
there's certain
wherever
situations
I'm
where
at.
like you can go out there and flip a, let's just say a rodent, a strike king rodent, and I'm flipping a jig. I'm there in my opinion. There's a big difference between flipping a jig and flipping a soft plastic.
Like in grass and stuff.
No, like in bushes. We'll just say
Yeah,
bushes
yeah,
for
yeah.
instance.
Like that's a
And and,
different
and and
deal.
you know, like if I say, "Hey Todd, I'm catching flipping bushes, flipping a jig," I
I
mean
mean,
that's
I could care less what jig you're throwing,
no, no.
what
It has
weight or
nothing like
anything.
it, weight, color. I'm just flipping a jig, and that's
Okay.
enough for him. Enough of a clue saying, "Okay, yeah, they're eating a jig.
So if
I
I
throw
go
these
through,
3 jigs."
yeah, if I go throw a jig that day, and, you know, like in the first hour, and you're like, hey, dude, it's good. And I go flip a jig for an hour, and I'm like, okay, like, okay. So I go throw a black and blue one, you know, I'm like, this look, okay, they're not biting this. I'll instantly change because I know
Yeah,
it's working. So I'll figure it out. But I'm not going to be like, you know, go flip it. I'm not going to need all those
yeah.
details. I'll
And
just
and,
figure it
and,
out.
color, and color is such a it's a funny thing. I remember flipping some bushes on Rayburn during the floods, and Dickie was right around the corner. Dickie Newberry was right around the corner and did really good in that tournament. And he was flipping. I want to say he was flipping like California 420 or something like that. And I was getting all my bites on watermelon red, and I caught the living snot out of him. And he caught a few bigger ones than I did that day, or landed a few bigger ones than I did that day because I had just many big bites. And he told me, he was like, "Man, like I remember him saying," and he wasn't, and he's not big on color either, but he was just like, "Yeah, you know, like that California 420 was the deal." Like I'm like, I don't know, man. I just got just as many bites of watermelon red. Yeah, it didn't. It more
Uh,
so than anything, it just was about what. And at the end of the day, it's about what you're confident in. If you're anywhere near the right color, and you're saying like, and you convince yourself, man, this is the freaking deal.
I, I'm gonna jump on Dickie here then.
Oh no, don't.
Yo, yeah, because I'm cool with Dickie. This is going to be a slight on Dickie, but the biggest compliment to him. Dickie thinks it's the color. I laugh at that. It's Dickie. No, he's a great fisherman.
Yeah,
Like he thinks it's some color, and I'm sitting here going, "No, dude, you're really good."
yeah. You
That's the
know the
difference.
exact bush to flip in every time.
Well, he's good. So
Yeah,
so you have to take really good fishermen at a certain in a certain light.
yeah,
Some good fishermen are saying, "Oh, it's all about this," and I'm sitting here like, if Jason Christie goes off about this, and this, I'm like, yeah, but it's Jason Christie throwing that bait. Like
yeah.
the guy at the end of that bait is the reason he's probably catching more than you, not because of the bait.
He
Sometimes
could be off on the color and still catch the
it's
snot
still
out of him.
catching. So
Yeah.
Dickie's probably like, man, it's this color, and I'm sitting here like,
I will
yeah,
say
Dickie.
this though, he did clue me in on a profile that I wasn't throwing, bait profile,
Well,
and
my
that did make a big difference. But the I will say though, Todd is 1,000% right. You know, it's almost like going to, let's say, Jacob Wheeler and saying, "Hey Wheeler, Wheeler saying, hey man, I caught him on topwater day, and this was the topwater, and it was the deal." Well, Jacob's one of the best topwater fishermen in the country, like bar none. Like I've been in a boat with him, like phenomenal topwater fisherman. And he could sit there and say all day, like, I caught him on this topwater, and I won't be able to repeat it because he's Jacob Wheeler and
and,
he knew the exact
but
stretch.
well, okay. So I was gonna
You
say
know,
that is you got to look at it from a different, like, I know I fish differently than most.
yeah,
And a little bit, it's not like I don't cast differently. I don't reel my bait in differently. But when we get through a day, Jacob Wheeler, top watering, because I'm sure when I say I probably top water more like him, this is what I mean. I get through a day and I'm like, man, I fished this whole creek in here top water fishing. What'd you do? I'm like, well, I hit those 42 points over there. I picked up my trolling motor 42 different times and
yeah,
ran 42 different stretches.
yeah,
And you're like, huh? Well, I just fished that top water in here. No, no, no. That's like He's
Yeah.
like, this bait matters. Well, yeah, but he also probably fished it. And when I say fished, he's not working it different. The way this method of running that lake was different than
Yeah.
yours. Now, I'm
He
not
he
saying
had
I
a
do it
better
like him.
understanding of what was going on.
Right. So
Yeah.
I watch a guy working a top water down the bank, and he's working it down the bank on 6, and I'm on 10. And they're like,
Yeah.
well, I just covered twice as much water as you, and I didn't throw, like, I didn't try to pick it apart. I was going for a high percent, whatever. You have to take that stuff into account that I watch myself. Everyone's like, man, you run your trolling motor on high so much more than I do. Well, if you don't take that into account about how I'm getting bit, sometimes it hurts me, right?
Mhm.
Some guy goes, man, it was easy in here. And I'm like, man, I got 3 bites. And some other guy's like, I got 12 in here. Well, he slowed down, right?
Exactly.
So it's not that he threw a better bait than me. He probably just slowed down. And so you got to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
What I'll say with what I'm saying about the innovation part of it, my job is to figure out how do I get that bait in y'all's hands that that's my goal. I'm trying to figure out a bait that has nothing to do with color, nothing to do with anything, that I put it in all y'all's hands and everyone catches fish because no one else is throwing it. Like I like the baits that actually it's the bait. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of baits like that, but the chatter bait was that bait,
Mhm.
right? Like you could go behind every single person throwing a spinnerbait when it first came out and catch them. The whopper plopper.
Yeah.
You could have Jacob Wheeler up there throwing, a walking bait and have an 8-year-old throw a whopper plopper behind Jacob Wheeler all day long and that kid would blast Jacob Wheeler, blast
Absolutely.
it.
Yep.
And so that's where I'm more at I'm trying to develop. It's not always like that, but we're trying to develop things that aren't out there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
And,
my
and it's
job.
hard. It's
So,
hard to be original and
oh yeah.
innovative and things like that.